have been involved in supporting small business for over 20 years, and it is my passion and my love. And I think at the foundation of that starts with business planning. But let's get into the kind of nuts and bolts of what we're talking about today, and why you need a business plan. And I think personally, business planning, it kind of seems like a monotonous task, or can seem like a monotonous task, or an exercise in futility. And I really hate when entrepreneurs kind of feel this way, because this is something that should actually excite you. When you start to visualize, it really is that kind of manifestation of your business, whether you're just starting it, or whether you're right in the middle and you've been open for 3-5 years, or that you're a long-standing successful business, because the economies change, communities change, markets change. And so it's that reevaluation, or coming back to that pencil and paper or computer or whatever you're using, to constantly work on your business and not necessarily in it. I think sometimes that we find that we're spending, countless hours in our business because that's what needs to be done. But to really take a step back and work on it and reevaluate where we are. So I hate that when it's, considered like, oh, it's just, I've just got to work on this business plan just to get access to, some capital or whatever it is, when it's really something that, sit down just a little bit every week, every 2 weeks, maybe a monthly, and like just glance through it and be like, oh, I see that, the market in our community is changing, or that, hey, there's another, if I own a pizza shop, there's another pizza shop in town. How am I going to sharpen my pencil, so to speak? I often will use the analogy of competition sharpens pencil. So I need to put some pen to paper and evaluate that. But your level of success really does depend on it, and being on top of your game. The why. Business planning, it forces you to think. It forces you to evaluate every aspect of your business and really get into the details of it. It will often ask you the hard questions, and there's many business plan templates out there. I have several. We, feature Life Plan at the WBC. There are many. I mean, just Google and you'll come up with 100 business plan templates. None are better or worse than the other, but it does force you to think and to ask hard questions of like the what if, or how am I going to address this, or, oh, there's a gap here in my business. And to kind of work through those and finding those solutions. It allows you to avoid mistakes and avoid those big mistakes. So as my career has evolved and changed, sometimes someone will go into business and they maybe already have the capital on hand and they don't need a loan, and they really didn't think that they needed a business plan. And what they'll do is they're going to start, and I'll just throw this out for example, they're going to start a donut shop in a little town. Well, what happens is in a year that they're no longer in business. And maybe that was because there wasn't actually a market need, because there was another donut shop, 10 minutes down the road that had a long-standing establishment, or that the economy they were serving, that community hated donuts. And so, which should not be a thing. Everyone should love donuts, but that there just really wasn't a market need, and that could have been avoided had they done a little bit of homework. The other one is lack of capital. So you think, oh, okay, I'm gonna need $100,000 to start up my business, and I'm gonna get my equipment and all those things. But then there's a failure to figure, is the kind of adage I like to use, is that you didn't figure in that you're going to need 3 months wages or 3 months expenses, because maybe that they're on a net 10 or net 30, so it messes up with your cash flow. So those kind of things, business planning allows you to work through that. The other one that I see is on those big mistakes is you have an inadequate team. And especially as small entrepreneurs, I know that there's a lot of you that are maybe just a one-person shop. Myself, I'm a one-person shop. And that there are some things, quite frankly, I'm not good at, or I don't like doing. And you will find that too, that there's those tasks that I have to do them, but I don't like to do them. And if we continue to not like to do them, and you push them off, sometimes that can snowball into a really big disaster. So you just have built an inadequate team or not filled those gaps. And quite frankly, as we grow and we try to do more, um, some things just the balls get dropped, and gets overlooked. And so building that team, whether that's consultants, whether that's professionals, whether that's a friend that's really good at social media management, or things like that to keep you in front of your audience, is super, super important. The other thing is that there's stiff competition out there. And so if you fail to address competition, you are setting yourself up for failure, because you need to be aware. It doesn't mean that that they're better than you. You just have to understand the competition that's out there, the lay of the land, so to speak. What's their pricing look like? What do you do better than them? How do you showcase what you do better? And then pricing. This is probably the top one that I see as far as mistakes, is that sometimes as entrepreneurs, we underprice or undervalue our goods if we're in a retail setting, or even if you're in a manufacturing setting, that we're not calculating, all of our supply chain inputs, or those cost of goods all the way through the process. And so making sure that our pricing is not only effective, but profitable, and that the market can sustain it and endure it. The fourth point that I have there is proving the viability of the business. And so this allows you to look at it as a whole. And sometimes businesses are just short term, that's the way that they're designed. They're designed to meet a need for 2 to 3 years, or that a trend will change and that you don't have a spinoff or anything from that. And so what does the life of that business look like? And is it viable for a long amount of time, or is it just to fulfill a need? The fifth there is to set benchmarks or check the goal box. What does that look like? Is it that you need 100 customers by the 6 months mark, or that you want to have your retail front, especially if you're in construction or brick and mortar, and that you're setting those benchmark goals not only to move into that space, but have open for business. And so allowing those to kind of become manageable, and that you're essentially project managing your business as you're working on it and in it. The sixth point I have is obviously to secure financing. The banks, lenders, they want to see this business plan, and one, for underwriting, but two, to make sure that they get their money back. Bottom line, they just want to know that you have figured out that they are going to get paid back. So that allows you to secure that financing. I spoke a little bit about understanding the business landscape, and I don't want to be remiss, as we're coming out of a pandemic, and no one could have predicted it would have been a 2-year event. But understanding the business landscape and evaluating now what it looks like compared to business is not the same as it was 2 years ago, pre-pandemic. And so understanding what it looks like in your frame of business and what you're doing and how it's shifted or changed, has it went to a more online presence? Are people, if you have a brick and mortar, are they stopping by? Is that now starting to pick up because people are so eager to get out and, experience things again? What does that look like? And to ask yourself those questions, and how are you capitalizing on that changing business landscape? Because I imagine for the next 6 to 8 months, even year, we're going to see rapid change in just how business is done, and that's compounded by economics with inflation and things. So really taking a look at your pricing points, and especially right now with supply chains and the inflation, and I know that our cost of goods and most everything is increasing, to make sure that you're reevaluating your pricing, so that you're, at the end of the day, I know our margins are being squeezed, but you still want to be profitable at the end. And so what does that look like? Do you shift your inventory? Do you cut back on inventory and offer, different things? So to really take a look at that. Reduce risks. Here's another one that is probably often overlooked. And I'm not an attorney, but from a legal perspective, minimizing your risk. What does that, and so building a team around that and having someone look over that and making sure that you're insured properly, that you have coverage on your employees, or all of that comes into place. And to really take a look at that, we're here to help you and kind of advise you and share some contacts. But business planning allows you to really think through those, because many times as I'll meet with someone who's maybe been in business 6-8 months, and I'll ask them, what does your risk aversion look like? Do you have policies, procedures, things like that, even especially with employee risks? And often they don't. And so just to really calculate that. The other thing about your business plan, and this is one that I really like, is it gives you something to share. So and you can cut this down, you don't have to share that, your full financials with someone, but let's say that you're meeting with a CPA or a service provider or a contractor or even a potential investor, or just a marketing firm that you're going to work with. You can hand over your business plan. You can redact some of the information that maybe is sensitive, but it tells your story and paints the picture of who you are and what you're wanting to do, and gives them a full grasp of your business. And so I think it's super important to build it. And you can make this, I don't often want to say a business plan should be 20 pages of typed. That's not super practical. Maybe it's your menu, maybe it's some of your marketing material, maybe it's some of your promo items that you have screenshots of. Maybe it's just your organization chart. So to really break that down, to share that with individuals who are willing to take a look at your business for various reasons. And it's also a selling point. So your business plan, so you've built up this wonderful thing. You can turn that over to a potential seller and say, this is what I was able to build from. And I think there was an instance a few years ago that one of the companies I'd worked with, she had grown it into a multi-million-dollar company. And when she turned over the business, sold the business, she gave him 6 copies of her business plan from where she started to where she was. And it was pretty phenomenal and pretty profound, because you could see the whole track record of how she had built this business, which was very, very exciting to see. We'll get into the parts of the plan, and I'm just going to kind of thumb through these really quickly, and then I'm going to get into the detail of each of those. So first 5 parts are the executive summary. You always do that last. I know I have it first, but you do that last. The business and industry overview, market analysis, sales and marketing, ownership and management, the operating plan, and financial plan. Those are really, you can bullet point those out. You can do this in a PowerPoint. You can do this in a Word document, your notes, notepad, whatever that looks like for you. But here's really the parts of the plan. And they're specific, and I'll share kind of some business plan templates that I have after this. But that's really the sections that you need in your plan. So first, the executive summary. Again, this is the last thing you do that kind of recaps everything. And it's the purpose of it is to give readers kind of a holistic view of your company and the market before really getting into the details and the nuts and bolts and of your business. So there's going to be a lot of things that are very hairy, very detailed in your business plan. This just kind of gives that high level view of your business. The business and industry overview. So this allows you to describe your company, who you are, what you do, what you make, what you sell, and kind of your mission statement, kind of that culture that you're building within your organization. And I think it's one thing to pinpoint that you can be a person of one, in your company. You still have a mission, and you still have kind of those values at the core of whether that's more individualized or as you're looking to set and build something. So I think it's super important. It's one of the things that we overlook. I know I've overlooked it in my couple of companies until I really thought, you know what, this is who I am, and I'm going to take a more personalized view of it. But as I grow, that I want, and I maybe bring on a part-time employee, that they hold and share that same mission and same values that I have. Your location details. Now, this could be like I'm an e-commerce store, and here's my web address, or that if you have that brick and mortar, that where that's located. Your business structure. So you could be a sole proprietorship. You can be an LLC, a corporation, S Corp, C Corp. a partnership. There's many business structures, a co-op that you could look to establish. And so how that is outlined, and be sure that if it's maybe a partnership, that you kind of detail that business structure. And then the owners, the details of the owners or owner, and what qualifies you, how long you've been doing this, essentially kind of a resume. And then the marketplace. So if you're putting your location, whether you're e-commerce, that marketplace is a lot wider, and a lot more vast, or is it a brick and mortar that serves a community or two? And how you're trying, so and what the needs that you're trying to meet, and how your products or services are meeting those needs. So, and I also say brag on yourself a little bit here, because one, you're not going, no one starts out, I don't think, with the intention to start a business of subpar goods or services, like, I just want to be average. No, you really want to knock this out of the park, that I want to be the best that there is, because I want to be profitable and I want to be successful. So your competitive market analysis, I'll spend a little bit of time here.
Excuse me.
Yes, go ahead.
I have a question.
Uh-huh.
For these various categories or things that questions we're answering, do you have a length that's appropriate?
I don't. Now, and I'll pull up here in a short second a business plan template that I like. I mean, I would say a good paragraph, but sometimes that can be answered in a sentence. That I'm a single member LLC. Okay, that would be enough. But if there's a partnership agreement, or it's an LLC with a board, that needs to be discussed there on the kind of legal structure. But the marketplace, I would really dive into some details there. A good paragraph or two, kind of highlighting, and there's different ways to capture that data, and I'd be happy to share that on an individual basis to tailor that to your specific business. But there's a lot of good like consumer reports. So I'll kind of go back to my donut shop analogy at the beginning, and that you're building a donut shop in a community, and there's some consumer expenditure reports that are out there, even just market data that says, okay, the person that will average spend on breakfast is $7.13. So you can start to drill down some of that information, that those would be in that specific zip code or region, that you can capture some of that data to help drive your decision making. So here is where just kind of the market conditions, and I know that we're all in kind of this weird paradigm right now of the pressure of the economy. I think we're all starting to sense that, and we've had some conversations with colleagues that have businesses, and even just out in the community. And so that there's this kind of weird looming pressure or feeling in the room, so to speak, of where the economy is at right now. But to really evaluate that, and as maybe consumers, disposable income or expendable income starts to deplete a little, how does that affect your business? Or are you one that it's maybe the opposite effect, that and I'm an IT service provider at this time, and so people are working still from home, and so I'm staying incredibly busy at this time. So really to look at the market that we're in, also kind of look at the landscape. What does traffic flow patterns look like? And if you're a brick and mortar, is there a thoroughfare of traffic there? Is there foot traffic? What would be bringing people to my community? So there's lots of things to look at, as far as the market conditions. And again, I'm here to help, and I can post some of these questions. I've got a Word document that will kind of help spur some of those answers as you really think that through. The next one is an exercise that I do with almost every entrepreneur. And it's a SWOT analysis. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. I just do a quadrant box. You've probably seen that. And to really hone in on, what my strengths as an entrepreneur or my business, what are those? Is that because I've got understanding of the business? Is it that I have a key location, as my strengths? I have great staff. I have a supply chain that is not impacted. I have a great social media presence. Maybe your weakness is that my internet connectivity is not great, that my cash flow could be better. Maybe opportunities is there's a new community center being built. There's a new boon in our local economy of people that are moving back to the area. And then threats, I think, the past 2 years have kind of shown like, I think a pandemic should always be put on one. That was a new one that I'd never had to put on a threat in that box before, but how that can significantly impact businesses is that, what does that look like in your case? And so, I mean, even as you're on this call, just kind of make a little quadrant box and start to say, what am I really good at? What are some of my weaknesses? The one thing about a SWOT, weaknesses can always be strengths because you can always build upon them or change them or learn. And so weaknesses can always be transferred over into strengths. Threats can always be opportunities, and they can go, if you mitigate it, if we go back to that risk, that threat, like, okay, what have I done to minimize this or mitigate this risk? So how have I, not that you can pandemic proof, but like, what if there's, a recall of something? So you can address that in that risk situation once you've identified what they are. So those in the SWOT box can always change and kind of move around. And then the other one is, what are the strengths and weaknesses of your competitors? So I would say also SWOT box your competition. Again, this competition sharpens pencils. And I often would find myself when I was doing a lot of international and I was traveling some, and with a couple of my businesses, I would do a SWOT on my competition. Like, okay, what are they really, really good at? Okay, what do I see that maybe their weaknesses are? Because it's easier to kind of pinpoint those in other people. And so within that, you can sharpen your own business acumen and your own business when you start to look at other people's, what they're doing really well, maybe what a blind spot or weakness they have is, and then what are maybe some of their opportunities and threats, and can you capitalize on them?
Yes, I have one. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, hi. So I did write it in the chat. We just started adding to the chat, but do you think a business is taken less serious if they're a sole proprietor versus an LLC?
Do I think they're taken serious?
Less serious,
Less serious. So I think that really depends. And I see a need for both. And so I'm going to speak kind of personally. I have 2 sole proprietorships and I have 2 LLCs. And the primary reason that I have both, I think it really depends on your business. And for me, it became a risk situation that if I knew that I was like my Etsy shop, I'm a sole proprietorship. That risk, because it was a risk issue for me, that I didn't really have many risks that people were not going to sue me because they're piece of art. You know what I mean? Like, so there was some risk aversion things there. But like with my mobile beverage bar, just because of what they would be consuming and that you're in food and you're interacting with the public, often I found that the LLC was a good barrier to protect my personal assets from my business assets. And so to say that they're taken less serious, I don't think so. The one thing I would encourage though is how you're operating your sole proprietorship, and to kind of give it, if a little more bite, is to go ahead and register your name. So if you are like, and I'll just say Kelly O'Brien Industries, I'm going to go ahead and register that name with the Secretary of State's office. I'm not an LLC, I'm still Kelly O'Brien Industries sole proprietorship, but that kind of will give that, if people are a little bit leery, that credibility. And then if they would be doing a little bit of due diligence, that it still is going to pop up, as a registered entity within the state of Ohio.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Information.
Again, I get your pens and papers and notepads out, but how do you plan to sell your product or service? Is this, that you have a brick and mortar, that you have an e-commerce? And then if you're a service, how do you plan to get in front of those customers? Let's say if you have a home cleaning service, or you're a contractor or you are an engineer. How are you planning to get your information out in front of potential customers? So to really look at that and what's the best avenue to deliver that product or service to people. And then if it's, that you have a brick and mortar, how do you stage that so people that it's appealing? How do you create that environment that makes people step through your door? And then how do you plan to get noticed? What does that strategy look like for you? Is it a blitz advertising campaign? Is it a social media campaign? Is it ribbon cuttings, open houses? Is it, that you're putting yourself in the news and having, kind of op-ed articles written? Is it that you are relying on networking events, maybe at your local chamber or your women's business group or whatever? How do you plan to get noticed? And so what does that look like? And also, what does that cost? So to create a budget for yourself, we'll talk finances a little bit later, but how do you plan on doing that? And then again, is it a combination? Do you have a brick and mortar store? Are you online, only, or are you using a hybrid model that you are, have the online presence, but also a brick and mortar location? And then what does that look like if you are online, to cast your net? How far does, if you're familiar with, like, I'd sat in a seminar not too long ago about geofencing, casting that net of then advertising to those people in your region or your area to get noticed. Sales and marketing is a big, wide, vast world. And so to really hone in on what makes sense for you, but not only what makes sense for you, for a budget. Marketing costs money. And there's some things that you can do yourself for very little cost, if not free. Like if you're using Facebook or Instagram, which are great drivers, but it's how do you capitalize on those? I mean, I had my best success utilizing Instagram with my Etsy shop because I allowed it to feed my Etsy shop. I would, post something and then I would connect with other makers and artisans and we would share each other. And so your presence is cast forth. So it's the same kind of thing, but to really make that pen to paper and address that strategy? Or is it that you have a very large budget that you can make work for you, billboard advertising, a publisher or publicist, and maybe a marketing company? We do have a couple trainings coming up on marketing, and so I'll kind of leave that to the marketing gurus that we have next week. I believe we have one in the following week. So I would encourage you they're going to address and talk about these specific things in detail as well. So I'll leave that to them. But how you incorporate it in your business plan would be a great benefit to you. So ownership and management. This is where I spend a lot of time on a business plan. So that goes back in your kind of executive summary, but this is you as an owner and what your management maybe style and your experience. So like that resume, that if I'll use my donut shop analogy. If you have never worked in a donut shop, that's one thing. But if you've never worked in the food industry, that's another. And so how do you get your business acumen and then even just the environmental acumen up to where it needs to be? That maybe you worked in manufacturing and so you're able to apply those principles here, but maybe you need to sit under another baker. Maybe you need to work in a food restaurant for a little while just to kind of understand the flow of things. And I often encourage entrepreneurs just to do just that. You may have a passion for baking, but until you get that exposure and that knowledge, that's another thing. And even funders and financiers are going to look at that. Like, what experience does this owner have when it comes to owning and operating this type of business? Excuse me. The legal structure, we've talked a little bit about that. If you're, that sole proprietor, the LLC, that partnership, that co-op, that C Corp, S Corp, what does that look like for you? I encourage you always to meet with an attorney. We have professional advisors within our network that can help you Sometimes that maybe that single member LLC is what works for you, but to really look at that and make sure, one, you're risk adverse, or that you're kind of separation of business assets and personal assets, and maybe you don't need that and you just need a liability insurance coverage. But what makes sense for you, and also to look at that as you grow. It may just be you for right now, so year 1 to 3 you said it's just going to be me, I'm just going to be kicking this. But at year 4 I have anticipated that I'm going to need to hire someone or 2 people, and that we're going to grow into this. And so you really need to look at what that looks like for you as your legal structure and as you grow. That gets me to staffing requirements. So as Bonnie mentioned in my bio, I did a little bit of a stint in HR. And what does finding key people and people that you want trust, that build your team, that have those same mission and same values. But what does that look like for you? Or are you utilizing a subcontractor for certain things? The other thing, and I will preach and preach and preach, is have policies and procedures before you ever hire your first person. I'm here to help with that. Like, create a handbook for those employees. That way the expectation is set, and that you're not building the plane as you fly it. And because, I'll just say this, sometimes people can be dirtbags, and they will take your kindness and run with it. And so, or they'll kind of take advantage of your generosity. And so they'll start calling off Friday and Monday. And if you don't have a policy or procedure or something outlined in a handbook, and that there's maybe disciplinary action that needs to be taken, but and then you ultimately fire that person, it can get into a unemployment dispute because there wasn't documentation that was not outlined in the beginning. So I can tell you lots of HR horror stories, but make sure that those things are in place as you're looking to hire. And what that looks like, that you may need, person 20 hours a week, and this is their roles and responsibilities. So I'm here to help with that if you have any of those needs. But absolutely, probably top of my priority list as I'm looking at this part of the business plan is making sure those policies and procedures and that handbook and everything is in place if you are going to have employees. The other is the organizational chart. What's the flow look like? I mean, you may be the owner and operator of this business, but you have a subcontractor, and so that they're not in your business, they're that dotted line, or that maybe you have some employees, but just so they understand the flow of how information is shared, how their kind of hierarchy is. But more importantly, I think that it's super important in that org chart is it gives maybe your employees, if you share this, like a visual of what that growth ladder looks like. And in today's world, when it's one, hard to find employees, but 2, they're always looking for that next opportunity, next job. Give them a visual so that they can see that there's a growth ladder for them, or career ladder. Your operating plan. This is going to be like physical requirements. What does it take for you to actually get your business and your product out the door? Is that equipment? What does that entail? What's the price tag of that? Supply chains, to make sure that those, if you are, I'll just say, a boutique, who are your suppliers? Who are your wholesalers that you're working with? If you are in the donut shop business, who are you getting your raw materials and your cost of, or your goods from? Again, your staffing requirements, what's going to take to get that product out the door? Your processes, to make sure that those are clearly defined. And this should be very, very, very detailed. Okay, and then the financial plan is the most crucial. This is where the essentially rubber meets the road. And to see if your business, if it's actually viable on a startup, or if maybe that expansion is worth it, or if it's going to make sense. And what that growth trajectory looks like for you. And you must demonstrate the growth and profitability of your company. And I'm going to pull up, I've got a financial model that I'll show you. But I think it's also key here as you look and you're putting the pencil to paper on those numbers, is underestimate your revenue and overestimate your expenses. I'm not saying overinflate, but overestimate by a little bit, 10% maybe, or even more, just because of the way the economy is right now. You may want to say 20%, because this is going to be like, typically you're doing a year's projections, and I don't know, I mean, I know what today's prices are, but 6 months from now, those margins could have significantly shrank. And so you want to allow that you're constantly revisiting that, hopefully every month on your numbers, but that allows you to look at that year end and hopefully have enough cushion for that. So here is kind of like, and I always say as companies are looking to start, or even if they're looking to grow, start with expenses first. That's the one thing that we know, that's the one thing that we can control. And because it's a known factor. Sales are not, expenses are. So your list of equipment, costs, goods, furniture, fixtures, all of those, maybe that you're remodeling a space, you know what that's going to cost you. Your operating capital, I like to say 3 months expenses and any other startup expenses that you have, that's going to give you a total. And then the money you have down to invest, and then we can figure out your amortized loan payment from there. The other category is that monthly operating expenses. So what's your utilities? What's your communication, like telephone? Any operating expenses that you have, plus your employee salaries and your salary. Don't forget to figure that in there. And then supplies and cost of goods. I'm going to kick over Bonnie. I'm going to pull up a financial model that I use. I'll start it here. And I'm happy to share this. I built this, oh goodness, a long time ago, 10 or 15 years ago. And I'm happy to share this with anyone. This allows you to start, if you don't want startup funds or expansion, you can put in any amount of your startup expenses here. And then, any operating capital that you need. And so I say start here. This is a really good starting spot. And then click over to tab 3, because you know what your monthly operating expenses are. And then you can come back for your salaries and wages. And I'm just going to throw some stuff in here just so you kind of see how this works. If you're going to, so this was a massage client that I was working with here. And she had $3,600 a month in massages. And so we would go ahead with that. That was what her booking allowed her to do. And so you can see as that, let's pull that all the way across. And then she had some other services. And then as you kick this over, what happens is this creates your full cash flow. This should self-populate. So I was doing some modeling in here, but this will create your cash flow financials, your projections, and your cash flow and your income statement. And so it's very, very easy to use. Live Plan, one of the business planning software that we use, has this as well. It's a different model, but it's the same kind of thing. And so start with your expenses, and then we can work on the projected sales forecast. And I say that to work backwards out of those numbers. So you kind of have your monthly cost, what that's going to be. We'll just say, it's $2,500 a month is what your bills are. That's your loan payment, that's maybe employees, whatever that looks like. And then we'll use our example of the donut shop. If you sell donuts for $1, you have to sell $2,500, 2,500 donuts just to break even a month. And so what does that look like? And is that obtainable? Can I sell 2,500 donuts a month if I'm open 5 days a week? And you can start to do the math to really break that down. So that you have a daily cost of what your income needs to be and your daily operating costs. Does that make sense for everyone?
Thank you, Kelly. That is a great spreadsheet. That's wow. Good job.
Thank you. The final thing that I say to include in a business plan is not only, excuse me, the finances, but just in your appendices. So if you have those menus, those marketing campaigns, any kind of material that you have is super, super important to include, because that's essentially your voice when someone is looking at it and what you're doing.
is there software that you recommend for the accounting part or organizational part of the business plan?
So on the accounting part, I mean, there's always, QuickBooks or something like that when you get into true like accounting. However, I have used the financial model that I'll share with you. I have clients that use it and they just put in their real numbers every month. So if that works for you, if not, there's also lots of just Excel spreadsheets. I mean, it can be broken down pretty simple. It depends on what type of business that you're looking at and how robust you need that to be. But there's always QuickBooks, and then there's just even some Excel workbooks that do just the same. If you are good at record keeping, essentially. And I can kind of defer. I think Catherine is on here, my colleague Catherine. Catherine, you may want to chime in. She's one of our relationship managers. If there's something that she's, on the finance side that they use or have seen in the past.
Yeah, hey Kelly, I am here. Thank you. I would say it really just kind of depends, on the one that works best for you. I know Ella has some templates that she shares, and I know you've got kind of the ones that you do as well. But from a lending aspect, we'll certainly consider everything.
Yeah, and then on, kind of those monthly record keeping, I can share if there's something that particular that you're looking for, depending again, like Catherine said, on the type of business and what's going to work for you. If you're on a cash or accrual basis or what that looks like, we can work with you on that to provide some tools for you.
Okay, thank you.
I would be happy to kind of walk you through this. It sounds like that you're very good at, at your food business. But it is, so that kind of goes back to that beginning conversation I had. Like, I do like kind of business assistance every day, but there are things that I hate about business, and quite frankly, I stink at it. And so, building those mentors or that person alongside me, let's have a one-on-one and kind of walk through the nuts and bolts of even that financial model or live plan to see maybe how we can help. And sometimes it's like we're speaking two different languages, and so to break that down, and I'll learn from you as well, and let's have that conversation and see how we can make that a good resource for you.
Says, I have a business concept that is a hybrid of two industries. How would you suggest I present the business industry overview and the market analysis in a succinct manner? For example, data from commercial cleaning and interior design services. How can she put those together?
So I would, do kind of one paragraph specifically, to the cleaning, and then the industrial design. And then really that next paragraph should be how she is going to merge them. So that should be a what that looks like for her business. So while you have the two funnels essentially forming one, what that looks like for her and how she is going to tie those together. And we can speak more in detail. Again, these are very tailored responses, based on those type of things. But to be very succinct in this is what I'm going to do, and this is how I'm going to do it. This is where I see that overlap, and that where they overlap and why it makes sense to bring them both together. Does that make sense? The one thing I will leave you with is really do your business planning, and that it's not an exercise in futility, that it's something that you can revisit over and over and over, and it keeps you fresh, it keeps your business fresh, and ultimately it's going to keep you profitable. That's all I had. Thank you guys so much for hanging with me, and I really do appreciate your time.